Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Ketubot. We are up to Perek Tet Mishnah Alayev. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilui Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Yisraelov, and Chana bad Miriam, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. And Le'avdir ben Chaim Lechaim, V'lerefuah Shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Cholei Yisrael. Like we learned in the previous chapter, although a woman's malog properties belong to her, her husband has some rights in the properties. He may eat their produce. He can stop her from selling them or giving them away. And when she dies, he inherits them together with the rest of her property. This Mishnah discusses a husband who gives up all or some of his rights to his wife's malog properties. Hakotev li'ishto din udvarim en li binchasayich. If one writes to his wife, and the same halacha applies if he says it without writing it down, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your malok properties. He may still eat the produce from her properties while she is alive. And if she dies before him, he inherits them from her. And despite his statement, the commentaries explain he did not mean to give up either of those rights. He said only that he was giving up his rights to her properties, which refers to the properties themselves and not to their produce. He also described them as your properties, which implies that he gives up his rights only as long as she owns them, meaning he keeps his right to inherit them after she dies, and they are no longer hers. If so, why did he write to her, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your malok properties? He meant that if she sold or gave the properties away, the transaction stands and he cannot take them back. We learned earlier in chapter 8, Mishnah 1, that if a woman inherits property after Nisu'in and sells it, her husband can take it back from the buyer. In our Mishnah's case, the husband gave up this right, so he is unable to seize her malok property from the buyer after she sold it, and she is even permitted to sell it in the first place. Now, the husband's statement is effective only during Erusin, when he does not yet have any rights to her properties. After Nisuin, when he is a partial owner of the property, it is not enough to simply say that he gives her the right to sell the land. Rather, he must legally transfer the right to her. And before Erusin, his statement is meaningless, since he has no connection to the properties at that time. The Mishnah continues with a statement in which the husband gives up more of his rights. Katav lah dinu dvarim eli bin chasayich uperotehen. If he wrote to her, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your malok properties or their produce. He may not eat the produce from her properties while she is alive, since he explicitly gave up that right by adding or their produce. But if she dies before him, he inherits them from her because he did not give up that right. Now, according to this Tana, the husband has given up the rights to all the produce. The Mishnah now presents a dissenting view. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if he wrote to her that he gives up the right to the produce, le'olam ochel perot, he can always eat the produce of the produce. Meaning, if she sells the produce and uses the money to buy land, he has the right to the produce of the new land, and he is entitled to the produce of that produce, and so on. Meaning, produce of land that was bought with produce of the previously bought land, and etc. Unless he writes to her, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your malok properties, their produce, or the produce of their produce forever. By adding the words forever, he gives up his right to any produce that results from the produce of her land, no matter how many steps removed. But if he just wrote the produce of their produce, he would still be entitled to eat what is generated by the produce of that produce, meaning the third level of produce and beyond. Therefore, he must add the word forever. And the commentaries explain that Tana Kama disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. In his opinion, even a single mention of produce, meaning I have no claim or argument with respect to your properties or their produce, saying it once, includes all the produce of the produce, no matter how many steps removed. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Yehuda, the Halacha does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, a statement in which he gives up all of his rights, Katav la dinu dvarim eli bin chasayich uperoten upere peroten bechayayich umotech. If he wrote to her, I have no legal claim or argument with respect to your malok properties, their produce, or the produce of their produce when you are alive and when you are dead. And ochel perot bechayah, he may not eat the produce when she is alive. He meta eno yoshah. And if she dies before him, he does not inherit the properties from her, since he explicitly gave up even that right. Now another opinion, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Imeta Yirashena, if she dies, he inherits her, even though he wrote that he is giving up that right, because in doing so, he made a stipulation that goes against something written in the Torah, since it is a biblical law that a husband inherits his wife, and if anyone makes a stipulation that goes against something written in the Torah, his stipulation is void. According to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, it is a biblical law that he learns from Sefer Dvarim, chapter 27, verse 11, that a husband inherits his wife. The first time, however, holds it is just a rabbinic decree, and the pasuk is only a support and asmachta. So when the husband gives up the right of inheritance, he is not going against the biblical law. The other rights mentioned in the Mishnah are certainly rabbinic. Therefore, even Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel agrees that he can give them up. The Rav does tell us, even though, right, the Rav does tell us like this, Maskana Demilta, the conclusion is, a husband inheriting his wife's properties is only from the rabbis, not from the Torah. And the verse is just a support. Nevertheless, the halakha still follows the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that he inherits his wife's property, even if he writes that he's not. Not for the reason of the Mishnah that he made a stipulation that goes against the Torah, because we said it's not from the Torah, it's from the rabbis. Rather, because the rabbis gave it the strength as if it's a Torah law. And therefore his stipulation is not valid. The halakha does follow the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. That is an abotai of Mishnah Aleph. Now, when someone owes money and dies, his lenders may take his land as payment. However, movable objects such as money, clothing, and utensils must be left for his heirs and may not be taken. Mishnah Bet discusses whether this law applies even before his heirs have received the object. If one died and left behind a wife who claims her ketubah payment, a lender who claims the money he is owed, and heirs who claim all his property as their inheritance, and when he died he had a deposit or a loan in someone else's hands, meaning someone was guarding a movable object for him or someone owed him money, who takes the object or money? Do his heirs take it as they would if no one else were claiming it? Or do we say that the widow or lender takes it since it is in someone else's hands and not yet under the control of the heirs? So the Mishnah cites a dispute regarding this question. Rabbi Talfon says, they should be given to the weaker one of them, meaning we give it either to the widow or to the lender, whichever one is weaker. And the Gemara on page 84 Masechet Ketubot cites two opinions as to who is considered the weakest. A, whichever one's document, the ketubah or loan document, is dated later. As a rule, someone who is owed a debt that is recorded in a document can take the defendant's land as payment, even if the defendant has sold the land, in which case the claimant seizes it from the buyer. One's right to take the land, however, is limited to land that was sold after the date of the document. Therefore, the earlier the date of one's document, the more likely it is that he will collect payment. In our case, then, if the wife's ketubah is dated later than the loan document, she is weaker, and we award the item or money to her. And if the loan document is dated later than the ketubah, the lender is weaker, and he gets the item or money. That's opinion A. Opinion B is the widow is always considered weaker because it is not the way of a woman to investigate her husband's possessions and find out where his lands are located in order to collect them for a ketubah payment. Therefore, we let her take the item or money instead. Right? So again, Rabbi Tafon says we give it either to the widow or to the lender, whichever one is weaker, but we certainly do not give it to the heirs. Since the heirs have not yet reached the object or money, we do not apply the general rule that movable items cannot be collected from the heirs. Rabbi Akiva, however, says, En merachamin badin, we do not show mercy in deciding the law. Although it is difficult for the widow or the lender to collect what is owed them, that is no reason to let them take the objects or money. Instead, they should be given to the heirs who are considered the owners as soon as the husband died, even before they actually received the object or money. This is because all of them, the widow and lender, must swear that they have not yet been paid before they can collect anything, because the law is that if one person owes money to another and then dies, the claimant cannot take any property from the dead man's heirs unless he swears that he has not yet been paid, while the heirs do not need to swear in order to receive their inheritance. Before the widow or lender swears, we do not know whether their claim on the item is valid, whereas the heirs have a clear and definite claim. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, as soon as the husband dies, the item is automatically acquired by the heirs, and the claimants cannot take it away from them. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.